Committee of the Whole is back in order. My colleagues, we vote, the last issue on the agenda was that we will rise from the Committee of the Whole with the recommendation to place in the third reading file. Senator Parrish, did you have something you wanted to make a statement, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I withdraw my objection.
You withdraw your objection. Do we have a motion to reconsider the vote? Because we already voted. We need to reconsider that. Motion to reconsider. Are there any objections to the reconsideration? There being none, so being that there's no objections, so then the objection to the recommendation to place in third reading file, I'll then now ask Senator Torres, the author, to make that motion so we can move along.
I thought we had that motion. That's what we're voting on now.
There's nothing to, she has to make the motion so we can finish it off, because what we did was
No, we have that motion already. We're supposed to vote on it.
All right, I'll just call for the vote. All in favor of, are there any objection to rise from the Committee of the Whole with a recommendation to place Bill 13-36 as amended in the third reading file? There being none, motion carries. We will now in recess.
All right. Colleagues, we're back from recess. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to report back to the body that the Committee of the Whole, with the recommendation that Bill 13-36, as amended, be placed in the third reading file.
On the motion, there's an objection. All those in favor of the motion to place the bill as amended by the Committee of the Whole on the third reading file, please raise your hand. Motion carries. We're now on continuing with our agenda on second reading. We are on Bill 1-36. This we will convene into the Committee of the Whole, which will be led by Senator San Augustine.
The Committee of the Whole is called to order. We will be addressing Bill 1-36 and the following panel Members, they have been contacted. We have Ms. Daphne Shimzu, the Director of Revenue and Taxation, Mr. Edward Byrne, and the OFB Director, Steve Guerrero. I know that some of you probably wondering, we should have Mr. Carlson. I just been notified that he's getting ready to get on a plane. He'll be leaving. Lester, that's the word I got. So we're trying to figure out a way how we can get somebody from BBMR. But I think the main thrust of this bill is the impact of taxes. And we got Director of Revenue and Tax, we got Mr. Byrne, and we have Steve Guerrero, the OFB Director. And I'd like to first read the rules of engagement so we all have an understanding of what we're going to do this afternoon. But first, I'll call on, is the panel on board already? And then we can call them on and have them swear in, then I'll read the rules of engagement. Not yet? Not yet? Okay, I'll go ahead and read the rules of engagement so we all understand it. Once the panel is up, then we can move from there. We will have 2 rounds of questions for the panel. Each senator allotted 5 minutes for questions, not including responses. At the completion of the 2 rounds of questions, the panelists will be excused. Amendments to the bill will be discussed after the 2 rounds of questions. Amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk via email, 36glsession@gmail.com. Amendments not in writing will be called out of order. I hope everybody caught that out. Hopefully there's no technical difficulties, the internet or something, that all the amendments will come in. All right? That being said, we're just waiting for the call by our MIS folks, the panels are online. So with that, we'll just take a quick recess and hopefully it won't be long. Thank you. And then we'll ask the author of the bill to introduce her bill. Thank you. Committee of the Whole has returned from recess, is back on order. If we can have the panelists showing on the screen and we have the sergeant arms swear them in.
Kindly raise your right hand. Director Shimizu, Director Burns, and Director Guerrero.
The other right, Steve.
Under penalties of perjury, do you all affirm that the information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
Did they all acknowledge the, I do? I think I heard Mr. Byrne.
Mr. Chairman, you may proceed.
All right, thank you, Sergeant Arm. I will now ask the sponsor to make her opening statement before we move on to the bill. Move on the bill.
Sito Usmasi, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak on Bill 1-36 LS. And Mr. Chair, if I may, I move to place Bill 136 LS as introduced, which is an act to temporarily waive payments of business license fees from October 1st, 2020, September 20th, 2022, and to allow for a business license fee credit for businesses who paid their license fees prior to the enactment of this act, and to cite this act as the Business Assistance Act of 2021, sponsored by myself, Tina Rose Muñoz Barnes, Senator Jose Pito Lahi, Senator V. Anthony Ada, onto the third reading file with the opportunity to speak, Mr. Chair.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I had introduced Bill 1, the Business Assistance Act of 2021, to help our struggling local businesses as they overcome this economic downturn. Mr. Chair, as the fiscal note indicates, and based on the discussions that we had on the public hearing, I did not disagree that this measure would hamper the collections of what the Department of Revenue and Taxation relies on. I want to share with you, Mr. Chair, that we know this bill would cost $2.5 million a year, $5 million for 2 years that this bill proposes that would be taken away from DRT if this measure is passed. But at the same time, Mr. Chair, we cannot ignore the fact that the local businesses here on our island are hurting, laying off staff, shutting their doors because the economy has been stagnant for a while. Just last week, a well-written article by Heidi Gilbert at the Guam Daily Post best summarizes the intent of this bill, as 1,074 business licenses are being canceled. More, Mr. Chair, more took risks during this pandemic. And it shares with us a story that I want to bring up of a mother of two who opened up a new local business after leaving her job in the midst of this pandemic. When our economy is at a standstill, Mr. Chair, we cannot sit back and complain about the challenges we face. We must, yes, put our differences aside and step up to help our community. And in that same spirit of inafamalik that has gotten us this far, escaping natural disasters, epidemics, road wars, economic downturns, it is the same spirit that we must remember and embrace to help us get over the predicament that we are in right now. I do want to quote one of the local businesses interviewed for this story. She says, "Don't let the pandemic stop you from doing what you want to do. Grab the opportunity to start something when you can. And for our economy to stabilize and go back to our prosperous days, we need our residents to have this entrepreneurial spirit. And we need to support them achieve this." Mr. Chair, $5 million when our CRER is tracking below projections is a lot. But the government of Guam, I want to share with you, yes, they did receive $117 million from the CARES Act. And according to our congressman, he shared with us that we are set to receive, Mr. Chair, another $661 million from Congress. And I want to share with you, Mr. Chair, we can and we must step up to help our community recover. And this is one step to achieve this goal, which I am sure we all share. And I hope that my colleagues can support this measure. Yes, Mr. Chair, I shared with you guys, the fiscal note says that, $2.5 million every year on an impact. Rev Tax at the public hearing noted that the impact to the Department of Revenue and Taxation was 200,000 plus, 250, I think, max. And I even said, well, maybe we can look at some kind of offset if we were to look at this bill and try our very best to help our businesses, 20,000 businesses. I just want to say that if we take a little, but realize that over $37 million based if all those businesses are in and then some are in play, then at least our government will receive those resources, right? Mr. Chair, you even said yourself at the public hearing that 0 of 0 is 0, right? And I want to share with you that if we take the time to work closely with all our businesses in place across the board, give them an opportunity for this little time period while we continue to recover, know that this government, our island, will receive based on what our good congressman is sharing with us and what the federal government may be giving our way. This is a small request based on what we will lose in the over $37 million that we would collect if these businesses were in place right now. You know, Mr. Chair, last time when we had the public hearing, I even talked about my own personal experience with my husband's business. And, you know, he owns a t-shirt company. And he's had it for over 3 decades, if not close. I don't know the exact date, but I know it started after we got married. I even shared with you that we used to be at the parade ground for years, watching the parade. But since last year, that couldn't happen. That's not going to happen. Because since then, it's been 0. Once this pandemic hit us, once everything closed down, there's no business. But I'm not just speaking for him, I'm speaking for those businesses that need a chance just to get out. If we give them a little and let them get this license, and like I said earlier, just based on what the Director of Rev and Tax said about about the impact to rev and tax alone and trying to see what we could do to help. I'm looking at seeing, maybe somebody can help do that recommendation, validate the license application and maybe even give it a nominal fee of between $1 and $10 that might help out. Because if we did a nominal fee of $10, the impact will be literally almost a wash. If we're looking at literally having 20,000 licenses, but I do know that just in the pandemic alone, we had more that applied, and I know that as each day goes by and as we continue to be in this pandemic, that more will close because it's not there. So we have to give it a start. And this is one way that I can show the business community that we're trying. We give a little, we all share, but hopefully, like this article that was done, and this lady who was brave enough to open a business during the pandemic, and know that she said, I took an opportunity and I took a risk, and now it's working for me. So, Mr. Chair, I hope that my colleagues can look at this. The question I want to pose, I mean, I can wait till my round, but maybe the question was just to reiterate if the impact was still at 250,000 and to rev and tax alone, and the solution again, because of that, could be in that vein, but I do know that there's a lot of money that's going to have to be utilized by this government of Guam when the money comes down, not if the money comes down, it's when the money comes to Guam. So those are the things that I lay on the table to look at, Mr. Chair, and I'm really hoping my colleagues can give this bill an opportunity. It has bipartisan support, and I'm hoping that more can tap on. I know the minority leaders shared interest, and I'm hoping if he shares the nod with him, I can even include him as the one of the co-sponsors. But I ask you, Mr. Chair, to help me facilitate this bill and ask my colleagues to help support this measure. It is a way and a commitment to show the business community that we care. I do know that there was an opposition of concern that came from the Women's Chamber, but I give a resolve to help out if anybody wants to proffer that amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Speaker Barnes. We have 2 rounds. And I'm going to first ask, are there any questions that my colleague would like to pose, and then we'll start the rounds. If there's no questions, we can skip that part. Yes, there will be. So Madam Speaker, you'll be the first then, if you like. Are you ready for that, or I can start from the back? All right, I'll start from the back. I'll start from Senator Pito. July, no questions. Senator Tello, do you have any questions, ma'am?
Suzy Masi, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we are doing 2 rounds, correct? Okay. Okay, then I'll reserve it to the second round. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Senator Tony Ada, sir, do you have any questions, sir, you'd like to pose to the panel?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman. I did have my questions during the public hearing. Thank you.
All right. Senator Brown, do you have any questions, ma'am, for the panel? None? Senator Brown?
No problem, Mr. Chair. I did attend the public hearing on this bill, and I mean, I recognize they put $250,000 that will be taken out of, or at least that amount of money comes out of the fees that are charged to rev and tax. If we could ask this rev and tax, where exactly in their operations would that impact them? And if we're not able to address appropriation, or if we pass this bill and it removes that funding from rev and tax, how would they make up that in their operations? What would be impacted by this $250,000 that's now funded from the fees?
All right, thank you. Ms. Daphne Simzu, if you could answer that question, please. The impact of if the funds are reduced, that are scheduled to go to you.
Got it. Jesus Masi, Senator Brown, and also Chairman.
If you can move closer, Daphne, so we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. I hope you could hear me now. As I mentioned during the public hearing, if we were to have a cut in our funding, then that would mean that we would have to make some adjustments in terms of likely our labor. And the reason I say that is because our budget is about a $12 million budget, where $8 to $9 million is for salaries and wages. And you know, the other items in our budget are, again, we have a very simple budget. It's generally our IT services, our rent and utilities for our building. And so we don't really have a whole lot of other items where we could potentially cut that level of funding. And so, you know, of course, as you know, our team for many years has needed overtime in order for us to be able to process refunds. And of course, now in order to be able to get out some of the federal funding that has come to our island. And so, you know, again, I think that in terms of where we're going to have to make some adjustments is really, you know, at this point is likely going to be in our headcount or in our ability to have additional overtime so that we can process those items.
I just wanted to further ask, Mr. Chairman, out of about 2.5 million a year that is collected out of these fees, 250 go to rev and tax. Where do we know where the remainder goes? Does it just go in the general fund basket? Do we know?
We can ask
The
Mr.
panel
Byrne,
respond
and
where-
we have
where the
Steve
rest of
Guerrero.
the
Yes.
funds go?
Yes, Senator, it does. It goes in the general fund.
Okay, so that's where the shortfall is going to be then, is the overall general fund budget that's going to be appropriated. And again, if just back to Director Shimizu for rev and tax, if we're not able to make up the difference if we do remove the fees, so you're simply going to not be able to perhaps process as much as you've been able to process? I mean, would it affect your overtime and things of that nature for your employees to do? Is this where that pot of money is primarily used for?
Well, you know, we have been provided with a lump sum budget. And so, you know, where we do have certain adjustments that have to be made from one fund to the other, or from one classification category to the other, you know, of course, we have been given the ability to make those adjustments. But, you know, likely that is what will happen, is that, again, yes. I mean, you know, we do have to make sure that we follow the permanent injunction, which requires that we make payment of refunds within 6 months of the due date or the date filed, whichever is the later. And, you know, we've been working to make sure that happens. I think that Director Byrne had mentioned that I think we're at a point where we, you know, have been very, very consistent in making payments in our refunds. And, you know, we're actually, I think, doing very well. I think probably one of the best times in our history in terms of making payments on refunds. So, you know, I mean, it may impact our ability to keep up with the schedule that we have been able to keep up with so far.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to ask the questions, and thank you to the panel for their response.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Madam Vice, did you want to ask questions, or would you like to wait and be last? Thank you.
Wait.
Senator Shelton, would you like to ask any questions? To the next round, Senator Paris, Oversight of Revenue and Tax. Ma'am, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And good afternoon to the panel. So this question is for Director Shimizu. Can you give us a ballpark estimate of how much overtime DRT is pulling in at this time to handle all the programs, both local and federal programs?
Actually, Senator Paris, last time we actually had, I think that the last time we actually were having actual overtime for our team was probably at the end of December. And so our team actually is working right now on an overtime plan so we could submit to our governor and to BBMR so that we can get our team to be able to have some overtime for some of the things that we've been doing. As you know, we have been doing drive-through services, and our team has been coming in to try to make sure that we can serve our community. It has not been an easy feat for us to be able to serve both walk-in and appointments. And so, you know, I'll share with you on February 12th, which was the first day that we began to receive refunds, we actually had over 8,000 returns that we received that were filed with us. There is just no possible way that we could accommodate, you know, I mean, even if it was just half the number of people, because we did have tax preparers come in to accommodate that level of people, that level of I guess, that level of customers in our building. And so, it's taken a lot of effort for our team. We have people not just inside, where we usually have of course, our team inside and processing and working on things and answering phones and working to answer emails. Now we've had to allocate resources to, outside our building, to directing traffic and to making sure that we screen people before they come into our building. So, in terms of overtime, we currently are working on our overtime plan, but we have probably not had overtime since, I think, December.
Okay. So in regards to, I guess my concern too is about offsetting, should this become law, how can we offset the loss of about, 200,000 to this, to DRT. And I think, I've heard a lot about how much effort the employees are going through to accommodate all the mandates that we place on you, locally and federally. And so I guess, this question, I guess, is for Director Byrne. What do you see as a likely source of revenue to make up for this loss?
Well, Senator, that's an interesting question to ask. We have many demands upon our funding, especially in this area of overtime. And I think that the director of BVMR made it quite clear that those that have relied upon the CARES Act in order to fund overtime can do so no longer, because basically all the CARES Act money is spent. I and you and all of us are very hopeful we're going to get alternative sources, federal sources, but at this moment we're kind of stuck between the end of the CARES Act and hopefully the beginning of another source of revenues. So it's really very hard to tell you with any certainty how this money can be substituted. And indeed, it's basically there in order to make sure that Revenue Tax is able to process all the returns that they need to process in the short filing period that they have.
Okay, this question's for Director Shimizu. So in the bill, it basically would waive all business license fees, and I know this was brought up during the public hearing regarding penalties, so that perhaps the way the language is written here, it could also encompass penalties. Do you have an amount of how much penalties are paid to DRT?
I don't have that amount, Senator, but I did want to share that during the public health emergency, I believe that from March 2020 through October 2020, we waived all late fees and relating to business license renewals, because, of course, we knew that there were, and even during periods when we were actually open to the public for walk-in, because we knew that it was difficult for people at times to, come in. And so we did waive all of the late fees and fines that were associated with, or penalties that were associated with renewals of business licenses, which were late during March all the way until October. But I don't have an amount on that. Senator Perez, I can try to obtain that information if you would like.
Thank you. So also, if I can, a further question. So the business license, there's a list of each fee and as well as the penalties that come with it. Do you have a breakdown of per se of how much of these businesses, and I think it was it roughly 20,000 businesses? Is that correct?
Correct. And if you look at our citizen-centric report for 2019, and I wanted to just kind of give an average so that way, we could share with the body what the potential impact would be on the businesses on average. So for business licenses only, not including, so for business licenses in the general licensing section in our CCR, we have $2.266 million that's showing as revenues. And then that's for FY 2019. And then that is for a little bit over 21,000 units, which are licenses. So when I was coming up with an average, I came up with an average per license of about $107.
Okay.
And so again, I mean, business license fees range from $10 to, I believe, $1,000. And I'm looking at the schedule now. And it just is based on the type of activity. And so if you want like an average, again, when I look at our CCR, I come up with an average of about $107 per license. But of course, the low is at $10 and the high is at $1,000.
Yes, that's correct. So like, for instance, a retail tobacco license is $100 versus a wholesale tobacco license is $1,000. And so if this law were to be enacted, then both entities would not have to pay those license fees. Is that correct? As you see that?
Correct. Although I did talk with my business license supervisor, because when we were looking at the language of the bill, it wasn't clear which section of Title 11 was referenced. So we're assuming that this particular bill would impact Chapter 70 of Title 11, which is our business license law. And if it is Chapter 70, Title 11, then it will impact, yes, all of these businesses that are on this business license schedule.
Okay. Yeah, and that was another concern I know that was brought up during the public hearing, is about, possibly having tiers, but that would be more difficult to implement. Is that correct? Or we require more work input?
I apologize, Senator Perez, I don't recall the question on tiers. I recall there was a question about perhaps having an application process. But if you, again, I don't recall the question regarding tiers.
I guess the point was as far as thresholds, maybe requiring a threshold level to allow for, waiving of the fees for those that are making below a certain amount. I believe that was maybe the gist of that. So if that were the case, so let's say, businesses that may not necessarily, need the support, if there was an application process that would determine eligibility or a threshold level, how much work would that require as far as, adding on to the work that you already have? Is that something that's feasible, you would think, or would you recommend that?
Of course, if it was just a kind of a blanket, taking all of the, licenses referenced in Title 11, Chapter 70, then there's no application process, then, the actual implementation would be easier on our team. If there is some type of an application process or, other things that have to be done in order to determine eligibility, that would add on to some of our work. And it would really depend upon what the final language for that type of eligibility and process would be. It would be difficult to tell how much work it would be, but yes, it would be a little bit more, it would require more from us.
Okay, thank you, Director. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Wolin, do you have any questions, sir? None? Senator Duane, do you have any questions this time? Senator Meritorious, do you have any? Nothing. Senator Nelson, nothing. Madam Speaker, do you have any questions at this time?
Yes, just a couple. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could ask, all right, so you talked about at the public hearing that you had already offered temporary economic assistance through the BPT deferral program in March 2020. And I just wanted to know if, how many businesses have availed of that deferral program, and are there any plans to continue that program?
Just Masi, Speaker Terlaha'i, for your question. Regarding the BPT deferral program, I do not have the numbers for you on how many businesses did avail of the deferral. But with regards to the deferral, it did end in, I believe, in the month of July. So it was April, May, June for, I believe it ended in the month of July, but it already has come to an end. So there was no extension of that BPT deferral.
All right, and no plans to do any others this year?
That is not something that has been discussed, ma'am.
All right, and then the business license renewals that are so currently pending, are you processing those? And are those, how many do you have pending? Or I guess, how many do you estimate are up for renewal?
With regards to business licenses, you know, I believe, I'm not sure if it was in 2014 or 2013, around that time. Historically, in the past, all business licenses were renewed in June, and then that changed, you know, several years ago. And so now we do have business license renewals that occur throughout the year. And so, you know, we don't have that huge, again, that kind of huge spike in revenues just at that one point in June, July. And so it's difficult to tell, ma'am, but we do have, people do have the ability to renew online, and that's something that we've been trying to encourage. As long as you do not have a tax clearance issue, you can actually renew online. Those individuals who have tax clearance issues, you know, we do have information on how they can work to get tax clearance so that they can take appropriate steps so that they can renew if there again is a tax clearance issue.
All right, at the hearing, I was shocked when you told us that according to your data from 2017 to 2018, DRT estimates that 90% of businesses who are GRT filers fall below the $500,000 threshold and qualify for the expanded Dave Santis exemptions, which taxes 3% instead of 5% of the first $250,000.
Correct.
Do you know how many numbers of businesses that 90% reflects?
So we do have about 16, and that's actually, Madam Speaker, that information is based on number of BPT filers. So the number of actual business privilege tax filers. And so we do have about 15 to 16,000 BPT tax filers, which means that if we take 90% of 15,000, well, that is,
okay. All right.
It's about 13,500. I did want to share, though, that that additional enhanced LEX-B, or the additional limited exemption for certain small businesses, is temporary, and it sunsets in next year in June. And so that is not something that is permanent. So the 250, 500,000 enhanced limited exemption for certain small businesses does end in June 2022. And then at that point, the 100,000, the 100 and 250,000, that will kick back in.
All right. As far as you know, is the money you received, the $250,000 approximately from this these types of revenue, is that pegged to a certain type of use by revenue and taxation by the department, or can you use it for any of your operating expenses?
I don't believe that this money has any specific restrictions on use.
All right, and do you have any, I think I asked this to you in a letter, maybe in January. Do you have any information or any way of clarifying which businesses may be really impacted, I guess, by the, let me rephrase that. How to distinguish the different businesses or the different business categories as to, based on impacts. Some of them, I think, have received less impacts by percentage, you know, over the year versus other businesses. And so I just wondered if you have any data in that regard that you could enlighten us as to which of the businesses or which categories of businesses we might, you know, try to narrow relief to really reach those businesses who are in most need?
No, Madam Speaker, we had not looked at the categories of business, the impact on specific categories of business. Although, I believe that, of course, as you know, the tourism industry, did have take a huge hit because of the issue of the, the travel issue and of tourist arrivals not being what they have historically been.
Right. So I guess that's why I've asked, because we hear a lot that the tourism industry or the, visitor industry, but I was wondering if you have it by categories as to how you would classify those businesses. For example, restaurants versus retail stores, whatever type of business license that they have, whether, we would we would be able to narrow that down. All right. Okay. Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We will now begin the second round. Senator Peter, do you have any questions? None. Senator Tello, do you have any questions, ma'am? We're on the second round, folks.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I just have one to clarify. It was talking about that this would be, this is for the Director of Revenue Tax. You talked about this bill talks about retroactive going back, I believe, until October, if I'm not mistaken, 1st, 2020. How difficult would that be for you to go back in the records of those who paid and it's going to be credited, it said? It's not, of course, not giving them anything, but what happens to those businesses who don't want to come back, who's paid it, and I mean, it's been some time since October, and we're finding out more and more businesses are shutting down. How then will you make them whole again if they were paying their license and fee and they're no longer in business? How will you be able to do that?
From DRT perspective, of course, because we've already received those monies, and if it's starting from the beginning of this fiscal year, those monies have been deposited into the general fund. I'm not sure if perhaps Director Byrne might have a comment in terms of how those might be able to either be refunded or somehow credited. I believe that we would probably have to have there should have to be some language to advise on what mechanism would be needed for that.
Mr. Byrne, if you could please.
Yes, Senator. I agree with what the Director Shimizu has just said. It's kind of difficult to. I think we would have to get information from Revenue Tax as to what was paid and to which period any payments should be carried over to. So it would mean a fair amount of administration between the two departments to make this work.
Do you think, Mr. Byrne, that it's going to need an amendment to this bill to allow that to happen, so that those who did pay their fees and then no longer in business and would be able to avail themselves of that license?
Yes,
fee?
I haven't had the opportunity to talk to Director Shimizu about this, but I think that what would amount to a refund would have to be would have to be permitted by some kind of amendment and some process at Revenue Tax to make that happen.
Mr. Byrne, it was said earlier that, since I have you on, it said earlier that the funding for this is going into the general fund. And according to BBMR, the total is about 4.3, which about 2.5 was generated from various business license for the total of 4.3. So is it correct to say that there would be a lost revenue to the government of about $2.5 million total?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be
and
correct.
of that, Revenue Tax mentioned that of that amount, 250, if I'm not mistaken, 250,000 would be an impact to her agency. So if this is going into the general fund, the remaining amount of money, where are you going to find where are you going to take this money from to offset? The remaining 2.5, so you're offsetting about 2.2 million.
Yes, Senator. I was asked that question just previously. Is that
I'm sorry.
that you know let me make sure that that it's well understood. The budget is a balanced budget. So if you remove any income from that budget, you would have to remove some expenditure to keep it in balance. That's a matter that isn't covered by this bill, and I don't think any of us just off the fly could tell you where those cost savings could come from, but there would have to be cost savings.
So, Mr. Byrne, the $2.2 million that obviously is, well, I know that Revenue Tax is going to have to figure out how they're going to make up for the $250,000, but you do agree that you will have to find somewhere in the appropriations. How do you say this? So, Mr. Chair, it's obvious that this amount, $2.2 million, is going to have to be realized in the budget, where this is going to come from, beginning at the very fiscal FY 2021 budget, because of course this is retroactive to October 1st, all the way to 2022, September. Now, I can see I'd like to know the amount of money really from October 1st, 2021, all the way until October 1st, 2020, no, I'm sorry, October 1st, 20, all the way to October 2021. What is that amount of lost revenue? Because as we go into September 2022, that's a full year, another, that'll be our FY 2022. So my question is, how much of that are we going to lose in revenue from October 2020 to October 1st, 2021? Do we just cut this in half and saying for FY 2021 we're going to lose 50%, so 1.5 million, or no, if it's 250, so $1.2 million for 1 year and then 1.2 million the next year? Because we can find this lost revenue or this revenue or the lack of it, in the next budget bill. Okay, so my question now is it going to be $1.2 million in lost revenue that we have projected? Maybe we can ask Steve from BBMR. I'm sorry, not BBMR, but OFB. So Steve, are you there? So the question again, Steve, I see you there. The question again is, how much revenue will we lose from October 1st, 2020 to October 1st, 2021? So it's basically FY 21. How much revenue will be lost?
Senator, based on BBMR's fiscal note, instead of the 4.3 collected for various business license, 2.5 million is estimated for the annual collection of a business license fees. So you would assume over a 12-month period, the government is collecting about 2.5 million. Okay. So if you're saying, if you want to know what the collection is from October 1st of 2020 to September 31st of 2021, it would be approximately 2.5 million.
Okay.
How much we have collected this year so far, I'm not too sure. I don't have that information. I'm sure that can be, we can figure that out, but I don't have that amount as we speak. But that would be the amount that you would expect to collect in one fiscal year for business license.
Okay, thank you for that, Stephen. That was my next question, to find out how much money is coming in for that particular fund right now. And we're seeing the CRE reports, we're seeing the special fund report, and is there how about Mr. Byrne, are you seeing anything tracking in with regards to the license and fees and collection? Or Daphne, are you seeing any tracking that anything different from what was projected in the FY 2021 budget?
Senator Tadegui, I actually will still need to look at the information on our business licenses for this fiscal year, ma'am. I do not have that information right now.
Okay. Well, that'd be good information. I look forward, Mr. Chair, that OFB provide us that information, what it is tracking in that particular account, because then I think it would be more of an impact than what's led to believe in the BVMR report. So thank you for allowing me the questioning.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Senator Ada, do you have any questions? None. Senator Brown, do you have any questions, ma'am? No, you do have one. I know Senator Blas has no questions. So, Senator Brown.
I just did want to make a comment that if this bill were to pass, it would take out this $250,000 out of rev and tax. I think as we look at the budget, this is something that we should prioritize in terms of replacement, quite simply because I think the critical services that rev and tax provides our community, and certainly the public expectation of our people to receive the services. I mean, rev and tax, as other Guam agencies, were affected by the pandemic in terms of being able to provide service to our community. And as we know, we all remember the visuals of those long lines, and I'm glad that they put a drive-through for a lot of the residents right now to be able to file their taxes and other things that they need to do. Land tax, I know, is due in a couple days, so I got to write a check myself here. But I just want to note that for the record, Mr. Chair, that this is one of those things that I think we really need to take note of for government operations as we look at the incoming budget. I think this is a significant impact to the agency that, as I've mentioned, all those areas in our government where we have direct service to our people, where our people interact with government officials and representatives, these are the areas that we really need to be mindful of to make sure that we support those efforts for our community. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Madam Vice, do you have any questions for the panel, or?
Yeah, I was gonna wait till the end, but Mr. Chair, just since I've been hearing the discussion, maybe I'll just ask Daphne to reiterate some stuff based on what I perceive was the lesser of two situations that will impact our government of Guam. Do we look at sacrificing 2.5 million, or do we look at 2.5 million a year, or do we look at something like 80 million for the next 2 years? I mean, this is really where we're at, and what we want to try to do to entice businesses to stay and giving them that opportunity to apply for license. So I'm just going to ask Miss Daphne, are you aware of the governor's request for direct aid to Guam to offset revenue losses caused by COVID?
Ma'am, yes, I'm aware that there is, of course, I know Congressman Nicholas came out and there has been information about, potential monies coming to Guam. Yes, ma'am.
So that would include revenue and tax losses impact by DRT. Just want to hear a reiteration. That's correct, right?
With regards to the use of the $661 million, ma'am, that's not something that I can say that I am aware of the exact use, because I know that when we did have the coronavirus relief monies, the monies that we received through the CARES Act, again, that budget was prepared, of course, by BBMR with the input of the various agencies. So, I really, there has not been the federal law has not yet passed, and two, I think that BBMR would be better able to say where those monies would be allocated, ma'am.
But Ms. Daphne, you do support the governor's request for revenue loss replacement, right?
Ma'am, I do absolutely support, of course, us and the governor's efforts to trying to make sure that we can get as much monies for our people as possible. I do have to say as well, in terms of this particular bill or measure, I think that perhaps in the media there might have been a mischaracterization of my testimony. I have not come out in opposition to this particular bill. I believe that, in terms of my responsibility as a member of the administration, and in particular as a member, as the head of my agency, that my responsibility is to make sure that I share with the body that how this particular measure will impact, of course, the operations for my agency. And so, just wanted to make sure I clarified that for you.
Thank you, Madam Director. And the reason why I'm asking this is because I think at the public hearing I did ask you, did DRT request for any funding source from the last round of COVID aid for Guam? And if you did, how much did you receive? And maybe a reiteration of that question?
So with regards to the COVID aid, if you're referring to the coronavirus relief monies, the governor's budget in May shows that Governor Leon Guerrero did allocate $6 million to the Department of Revenue and Taxation. We did not utilize the entire $6 million for all of the things that we had proposed to do. With regards to the processing of VIP, and I believe that is probably, that's what I recall was discussed at the public hearing for this particular bill. We did not receive any administrative fees for that. Although we did work to utilize the coronavirus relief monies that was allocated to us so that we would not have to impact our general fund as it came to, as it relates to the administering of these programs. But we are, for the next round of EIP, which is, we believe imminent, we have been requesting for the federal government to provide us with funding for our administrative costs because, it does cost money for us to administer these programs.
So Mr. Chair, I'm just going to ask, based on her comments, the Madam Director, that if the governor receives the aid of the 600+ million in direct aid, just an affirmation that the Director of Revenue Tax will ask for help in those efforts, right? Just a reiteration on that, Madam Director, if I may.
With regards to, of course, the operation of our agency and if there are funding, I am a continuous advocate for my agency, whether I am out in getting my vaccine and seeing, the National Guard there and making a case to try to get some aid in terms of their assistance, or, when I'm out and in different meetings and otherwise. My job again is to make sure that we operate our agency and that I'm an advocate for my agency. So of course, if there is going to be some funding, I will of course request for assistance. And if that funding, the $600 and some million does come in, of course I will, I think work probably with the fiscal team to make sure that we, try to get some allocation or portion of it. However, again, I believe that I'm not sure if even DOA may have better input on it, but definitely BBMR would be the best agency to discuss the allocation of those monies.
Thank you. And I will ask BBMR if they'd like to comment on that. Are they there?
No, DOA is. BBMR.
I mean DOA. Right. But you know what, Mr. Chair, if I may, maybe just bringing up another point and then I'll ask a couple of further questions. Because in the same effort as we look at the process of this, right, which is lesser of two situations, I don't want to use the other word, EVIL. So the same people that co-sponsored a bill that could potentially lose 80 million in BBT are worried about losing 2.5. And I bring home a point, Mr. Chair, because I'm really trying to find a resolve. I said earlier that there was concerns. I'm glad that the director reaffirmed the efforts and said that there was no opposition, but was laying what the impact was. And in the beginning, I even said, based on that, if there was a resolve, if we had to look at something, I offered that, right? didn't make the amendment yet, but I was just thinking about it, but how can we take the opportunity to help our business community out in general, whether my colleagues support that effort or not? What is the better point to work with? Do we work at the 5 million to give up or to lose the 80 million? So I know that as we look at each dollar and that goes in, government of Guam is to provide for the basic services of health, education, safety. We also know that the money that's received from other special sources, the governor provides as much cash as the authority allows and determines what is more of a priority, what can be shifted. I asked about the governor's request because working with our representative working in Congress and asserting that funds will come this way, knowing that we can look with this legislation for an immediate relief to assist, and looking at what is literally at a degree of certainty, if not, $2.5 million for 2 years at $5 million, 2.5 for each year, 5 million for both years, versus the 80 million. Of course, the most prudent thing to do is to help. But again, that is for us to debate on where our colleagues want to take this. And I was really hoping, Mr. Chair, that my colleagues could look at the merits of what is coming in for COVID relief and for economic recovery, knowing and supporting that all of us in here know that there will be money coming in. There's no doubt about it. I mean, unless somebody else can do a point of information for me and tell me, we know that those packages are on. And I'm not even assuming, sir, this is something. We continue to get the briefings, work with the White House, look at the possibilities of resources coming in, and working with the administration. I want to make sure that we are fiscally responsible. And I want to make sure that we support the business community. And I want to make sure that as a policymaker that I look at what is more reasonable and what can we give up. Because you yourself, as the chair said, that if there's no businesses that file taxes, man, 0 of 0 is 0. And Mr. Chair, I'm hoping that this administration will ask for anything and everything that it needs to help our government recover. And maybe I'm going to ask Ed, has he heard of any plan, or is there an opportunity of resources coming into the government of Guam based on the governor's request? Ed Byrne.
Yes, thank you, Vice Speaker. The congressman announced his view on the likelihood of passage of this new bill on Friday. So we haven't really had a chance to look at it and determine some of the questions that senators are asking about how will the money be spent. But you're correct. This provision presents the opportunity for the governor to replace lost revenues, which the previous CARES Act provision doesn't. And therefore, when we receive, and I sincerely hope we do receive, this sum of money, some of it is appropriately available to be used to replace these lost revenues, and whatever the lost revenues are at that point of time, that calculation will be used to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Mr. Chair, I know my time is up. I guess I'll get more time when I get to close on the measure. So
Yes.
thank you for giving me the opportunity at least to ask some of those questions.
Yes, thank you, Madam Vice. Senator Nelson, you had something you wanted to bring up before I proceed to Senator Perez that is concerned for, it will impact all the colleagues?
Yes, Mr. Chair. After consulting with our legal team, our legal bureau, I am going to recuse myself from any discussion and voting on this matter.
Thank you. Are there any objections? She's gonna recuse? Okay.
Why?
Could we take a 1-minute recess, Mr. Chair?
All right, let's take a 1 minute or 2 minute recess. Committee of the Whole has returned, is back in order. On the issue of Senator Nelson, we'll proceed on first and then we'll catch up with your concern. With Senator Perez is going to ask questions of the panel. And I've already surveyed my colleagues. There's no further questions after Senator Perez. And then I can release the panel. And we're going to go into the amendment portion, but we're going to recess after that and come back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock on only the amendments and anything else that we need to finish off. Senator Perez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panel for your patience. So I was during the break, I was actually doing some calculations that should this bill become law, it would have an immediate impact to the revenues of Department of Revenue and Taxation at the tune of $145,833. And so I guess the question would be to Director Daphne, should we are unable to, maybe the first question should go to Director Byrne. Do the allocations change if the revenue sources, if there's a reduction in revenue?
No, Senator, they don't. In this particular case, which is what you're asking, no, they don't.
Sorry, it's hard to hear him. There's too much echo.
Oh, sorry. I had to go into the car because I was running out of electricity. No, they don't.
Okay. So the allocations do not change to Department of Revenue and Taxation, even though the revenues would be decreasing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Will the amounts not change, or the percentages? Are you talking percentages?
The way this provision works is whatever is collected, the 10%, whatever that is, goes to DRT.
Okay, so maybe this question's for OFB. Do you see any changes as far as revenues go currently? Are we seeing, so for instance, in looking at the budget that was passed, the funding comes from general funds. There's 3 special funds. What are they tracking? Are we tracking over or under for all of those areas where the Department of Revenue and Taxation receives their funding?
Senator, based on the CER report as of December, so we will get the January ones hopefully by Saturday. But overall, Government of Guam is tracking below. I can say that in totality, but in terms of each specific fund, there might be a few of them that are tracking on target. There may be some that's tracking a little bit above, which I doubt very, very highly of that happening. But overall, right now, we are tracking below of what we estimated to project to receive in 2021.
Okay, thank you for that. So Director Byrne, so being that the case, how can we sustain the same amount of allocations if the revenues coming in are not meeting the expectations of the budget?
Well, Senator, that's always the case when revenues do not equal the amount that's appropriated in the budget. There always has to be some reduction of the, because you can only pay out what you have in cash. There always has to be some reduction in the amount allocated.
Okay, so the potentiality is that DRT may not receive, let's say, by the end of this budget cycle, let's say we're unable to find the funds, $145,000. How would that impact, so Director Daphne, what would you cut first?
Senator Pierce, with regards to, of course, our budget, I think again where we will have where we will have to look at is in our labor cost. And, we do have some ongoing efforts, which we started in the last year to try to hire and fill some positions, and also perhaps to even allow for some level of promotion, which has not happened in many years in our agency. And so, perhaps those efforts may be impacted if we're not able to get the funding that we need. In addition, as I mentioned, and I know, I think Senator Brown had asked about, again, what our plan would be. What we do every year have overtime that we utilize so that we can make sure we process. We'll have to figure out, I think, strategically how we're going to be able to allocate our resources so that we can continue to, process refunds. And so there is going to be some level of work that perhaps may not be able to be focused on if we're not able to get the funding again, because we'll have to look at the area of labor.
All right. So the other option too is increasing collections. And I know the tobacco stamp tax is one area. And so the cost of implementing that in-house was estimated to be about $300,000. Should DRT proceed with in-house enforcement? So would that be one of the programs that could not be implemented in-house because of this reduction?
With regards to that particular effort, I'm not actually familiar with exactly the strategy for that particular area of enforcement, but I will share, of course, our mandate is collections and enforcement and licensing, and our job is to make sure we collect. The challenge in collecting during this current situation that we're in this public health emergency is balancing out, collecting versus, of course, the issues that we're seeing with a lot of our taxpayers, where they are asking for some consideration with regards to, penalties and interest and maybe even some of their tax liabilities. So, for us, again, our job, and since 2019, we have made it a point to make sure that people are aware that our job is not just collections, but to try to get people into compliance. And so, yes, ma'am, of course, the other area that we can look at to try to help increase revenues through collections. Our team has certain initiatives that we are working on in the area of collections, which we are working to launch very soon. And so again, you're absolutely correct that, we are working on those collections, and DRT, as Director Byrne mentioned, DRT does receive in general about 10% of the fees that we collect here. So, when collections go up as well, our budget is impacted, and we are also able to receive more in terms of our funding.
Okay, thank you. So I know in years past, there was an increase to your lease, and you had to cut something within the agency. What was the first thing that you cut back then? I remember that there was an increase that was not accounted for.
The increase in our, excuse me.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Senator Bears. The increase in our lease, I believe, occurred in 2018, prior to our administration coming in. I believe it was in October 2018 when our current lease terms went into effect. Of course, we came in January 2019, and I believe that, and Director Byrne can also probably chime in on this, but I believe that in 2019, of course, we saw, our collections came in quite well. And so, during that time, I guess the issue, that we're looking at in terms of potentially cutting some of our funding because of collections was not necessarily an issue. But our actual lease, I believe the new lease that we have, or the current lease that we have, kicked in 2018.
Yeah, the other issue that I've seen is that DRT was without janitorial services for a couple months. Is that, what was the reason for that? Was it a revenue issue?
Okay, and so with regards to our janitorial services, you know, it's been an ongoing issue, I think, that we've had for several years, even when we had a chief of administration, that in terms of our services and continuity of services, there were certain issues that we faced. Now, what happened at the end of the fiscal year last year was we ran into an issue where our chief of administration retired abruptly. Originally, when he submitted his retirement notice, he was expected to retire effective December 31, but because of certain issues, he had to retire in September instead of December. So the transition for him, you know, of course, we did have challenges with that. And then when we did come into the last quarter of the year, a lot of our efforts were focused on trying to make sure that we did work to utilize the coronavirus relief monies that we did receive. And so our procurement efforts were focused on making sure that we were able to utilize those fundings because as Director Byrne, you know, will be able to, I guess, confirm that at that time, those monies were required to be expended by December 30, 2020. And so we didn't want to lose out on the opportunity. I know that in terms of course, even as we discussed with the legislature, the 35th legislature at that time, you know, the idea of us utilizing those monies for modernization was very important. And so, you know, our efforts in terms of procurement had to be focused on that. And so, you know, there were issues with regards to the procurement of that particular service.
All right, thank you. Just maybe one more question. So yes, in the previous term, DRT was budgeted $6 million for the CARES funding. Can you explain why you did not utilize, what was the reason for not utilizing the full amount?
So when in terms of the estimate, the $6 million estimate, you know, of course, we're grateful to BBMR DOA and the governor for, you know, making sure that that monies was allocated to us. In terms of our focus, and again, because we began meeting with the Office of Technology probably in June and went into full speed in terms of trying to procure things in September. And so we had a very short time frame within which we were going to try to utilize this monies. The areas that we focused on in terms of the use of those monies were, you know, we were able to get 80 computers, I believe 10 or 20 scanners, 7 laptops. We got 21 tablets. We were able to purchase PPEs. We were able to purchase thermometers so that we can check temperature, and then also plexiglass so that we can make sure that we, you know, continue to keep our people safe here. And so our efforts had to be focused again on those. And so the monies that we used, we actually spent monies again on those items. Also, we did have the Bpt Enhancement, which we, you know, again, will be going into effect effective March 1, where not only will you be able to file your original returns, but also your amended returns online. We also did utilize some of the funding for Zudi Mengafa, not only the actual funding for the benefit of our people, but also there was cost for labor and cost for programming that had to be done. So we did not utilize all that monies, but I believe that the monies we did use were actually utilized, you know, to the best of our abilities. Again, you know, I had to pull a team together to work on procurement. Again, we didn't have a chief of administration. We do, I think, in the area of administration in the director's office, you know, we are in need. I have been working to try to hire an ASO for at least the last 2 months actively. And, you know, we're actually going through our second round of interviews very soon. Again, you know, Senator Perez, again, you know, although we haven't had the resources that, you know, again, we've done our best to try to utilize those to the best of our abilities. And it's not to say that, you know, we definitely couldn't utilize the whole 6 million in some way. It's just that the time frame within which that we had to do it was quite tight. And so again, we had to focus our efforts on the areas that we believed, we could actually be able to accomplish given the resources that we have.
All right, thank you, Director Shimizu, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Paris. That being the last question to be posed in the second round, I would like to thank the panel for their participation today. Thank you, Daphne. Thank you, Steve, Ed. Drive safe, be safe, and thank you for your participation today. And to my colleagues, we will recess and resume at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning with only amendments, so please take a look at any anticipated amendments for tomorrow.